Welcome
to the joy of code.
Hello, and welcome to episode 397 of The Joy of Coding. My name is Mike Conley. It's so good to have you here. We're going to be, hacking on some Firefox E-related-ish stuff today. I'll tell you what I mean in just a second. Let's get started by sharing my screen. Hey, here we go. This is the agenda. Yeah, it's March 25th, 2025, episode 397. A reminder, no plan survives breakfast. I think I know what I want to do today. I think I know how it's going to go, but I might get sidetracked, distracted, sidelined, some emergency shows up that I have to deal with, and we're just going to roll with the punches as they come. I haven't done much in the way of preparation for the stream, and that's true for most streams. I don't really prepare much, and that's so that you can see me dealing with stuff as in an unprepared way. What I like to say is like software development in the raw. You're getting to see me deal with and grapple with things as I would if I was by myself not recording. I just happen to record myself while I'm doing it, and I'll speak out loud while things are going on. I'll try and remember to speak out loud. That's the first thing. The second thing, this agenda that we're looking at is available to you. You can look at this thing. If any of these links are useful, you can find a link to the agenda down in the video description on YouTube, or in the details section over there on Air Mozilla, or down in the channel details on Twitch. And as I update the agenda, this little spinny will spin, and if you reload the page, you can go ahead and just click on the links, and you'll have an up-to-date version. There you go. Yes, what's there to say? Well, first of all, I might have to end the stream just a tad early. Normally, I end the stream at about an hour and a half in. That's what I usually do. So in about an hour and a half, I'd end it. I have to end it about 10 minutes earlier than usual, because I have to prep for a meeting that occurs right at 2:30 Eastern. So I apologize for ending early, but today is also a little unusual because I'm planning on not directly working on Firefox today. I think that's what I normally do, and if that's the thing that you super care about, then you might not want to watch this episode. You might want to watch one of my other episodes. 98% of my episodes I'm working on Firefox. Today I'm going to be doing something a little more tangential, and we discussed it during the last stream, which is that I'm going to be looking into a new version control system. Not the martial art. This is named after Jujutsu. I think there's a martial art also called Jujutsu, and this is not that. This is a version control tool. And the reason I'm looking into this is because I was a Mercurial diehard. For a long time before I joined Mozilla, before I worked on Firefox, I used Git. I used Git at school, back whenever it was kind of GitHub didn't exist, but Git was the up-and-coming version control tool. I trained up on Subversion before that. I think I'd used CVS before that. But eventually, towards the back half of my academic career, it seemed like Git was kind of the go-to version control tool. And GitHub had started to kind of pick up around that, and Bitbucket existed, and SourceForge still existed, and all these things. Mercurial, I only experienced Mercurial from working on Mozilla code. So, whenever I first started contributing, and then when I got hired as a contractor, that was my first experience with Mercurial. And it wasn't a great first impression, having come from Git. I remember we had to use something called Mercurial Queues, which was basically an extension for Mercurial that allowed you to have a patch stack that you would maintain. And I remember that being very annoying. And I missed Git. I missed cheap throwaway branches. I missed all these things. But then we started using Mercurial's Evolution tool or extension. And that was a game changer. As soon as I started using Evolve, so I local history became mutable, complete game changer. And I used Mercurial that way for years, to the point where I wrote a document, Hallam Conley uses Mercurial. I think there's a document from Mozilla Code. Yeah, there's this document that I wrote back in the day, because, when we'd work with new contributors or students, here's my old Mercurial doc. I would point them at this document to be like, hey, this is how I tend to do things. This might be useful to you if you've never used Mercurial before. And now that we are transitioning, we are beginning this transition away. It's been underway for a while. This shouldn't be a surprise. We are transitioning away from Mercurial for Firefox code. Mozilla doesn't always use Mercurial. Mercurial is used for the Firefox desktop and Android products. It's used for a few other things, but for the most part, a lot of our other things that you might be familiar with, like the VPN code, the monitor code, I think all of that like lives in GitHub, and they tend to use Git. And Firefox for iOS also uses Git. And Mercurial is becoming more and more of a tax on us in terms of developer productivity. Like people are having to ramp up, and like a lot of the tooling that's out there is not built for Mercurial, and so we're suffering because of our usage of Mercurial a little bit. And so a decision was made about 2 years ago to switch over from Mercurial. And if you want to hear more about that decision, you can read more on the sort of the history here. Mike Homme is a Mozillian who... Oh, no, that's not what I meant. Let's Google Mike Homme, Mozilla, Git, Mercurial. He's a Mozillian who knows about lots of this stuff and wrote a blog post on Mercurial and the history of Mercurial and like the Git and this is like a fantastic history of version control at Mozilla from someone who's been here basically the whole time. And this is talking through a lot of the bits and pieces. And if that is at all interesting to you, if you want to know the history, here's Glandium is Mike Homme's screen name. Glandium's blog post about Mozilla, Mercurial, and HG, and how we almost used Bazaar. Is that true? Did we even consider it? Mozilla decided to move its source code not to Bazaar, not to Git, not to Subversion, but to Mercurial. And there were some blog posts, colorful blog posts about it. It was not a controversial choice. Mainly I think it was Windows experience. That like you couldn't really use Git easily on Windows yet, which was like a showstopper for us. But anyways, if any of that's at all interesting, you should check it out. So back to Jiu-Jitsu. So we're beginning this transition to use Git, or to have Git be where the tool that hosts our repositories. But having worked with Mercurial for so long, I miss a lot of things from Mercurial, and there are some real rough edges with Git's UI. And if you are a person who has only ever used Git, you may not notice these things like I did whenever I transitioned from Git to Mercurial. Like I remember missing Git whenever I switched to Mercurial, and now if somehow there was a Git UI for Mercurial, I'd use it in a heartbeat. I think maybe just people are used to the tools that they are used to. But having sampled both Mercurial and Git, I would say that Mercurial's UI is vastly superior. That's not to say it's perfect, but it is so much better than Git's. I would say that on the whole, Git's performance is maybe a tad better, but not so much better. And the cheap branches are nice, but you could do the same thing with bookmarks in Mercurial. So anyways, there's... The ship has sailed, and we're switching to Git, and that's fine. Jiu-Jitsu allows me to get some of the niceties of Mercurial while still using Git as the underlying repository, because that's what I've learned about Jiu-Jitsu, is that you can use Git as a backing store, backing repository for it. And so that's all I really know. I've not really done much. I tinkered with Jiu-Jitsu a little bit a few months ago when I first heard about it, but none of it's really stuck. And so I want to learn it with you for the next hour. I want to dig into some of the documentation. I want to read maybe some tutorials. There's one that was recommended last week from Steve Klabnik, who is also kind of, he's writing a blog post, or series on using Jiu-Jitsu. And so I'm thinking maybe we can kind of explore this stuff and try and learn it ourselves together. And if you are a Jiu-Jitsu expert and you're in the chat, let me know where I'm going wrong, or help me out here. So I already have it installed. I'm not going to work on my Mozilla Unified source code right away. I'm gonna create a test Git repository. I'm gonna call it like test Git repo. and I'm going to git init it, and I'm going to add a file. Hey, this is a file in Git. This is another line in that file. What do you think of Jujitsu? And Terabang. And we'll add that. We'll say first commit adding a README. So we've gone ahead and added that. And let's get, so now we've got like a testing Git repository, a local Git repository. You might want something with a remote for testing pushing and such. Well, that's interesting. Maybe we can set one up on GitHub. So hold on a second. Let me switch over to my GitHub. I'm gonna create a new repository. I'm gonna call it, test Git repo. No template. I am the owner, and test repo for playing with Jujitsu. I'll make it public, and no license for now. This is just a test repository. Okay, I've got an existing repository. I'm going to add my remote branch, and then push. Will that work? Good. Okay, so I've got a Git repo, and it is here if you're curious. Here, let me bring this tab over now. That was a good idea. Thanks, Simon. So this is the repository if you want to see what I'm working with here. Here's my test GitHub repo. And now let's read the documentation. So there's a lot of preamble here. I do have Jujitsu installed. It's version what? JJ version 023.0. And which JJ is it? I installed it with Homebrew. Let's make sure I've got the most up-to-date version of Jujitsu. And I think I can do brew upgrade JJ. I think that's true. So let's make sure. Hopefully this doesn't take too long. Upgrading Jujitsu to 0.27.0. Great. So while that's building, let's read. So this is the documentation for the latest release of Jujitsu. And then installation and setup. Well, I think it's already set up. A tutorial and bird's eye view, and working with GitHub. These sound very interesting. So let's read. Tutorial. Hint, this tutorial has become somewhat out of date. Many people find the alternative, tutorial by Steve Klabnik, helpful. So maybe I should be reading that instead. Okay. Let's go over here. Hi, I'm Steve. This is a tutorial for Jujitsu. Hopefully this book, this set of blog posts makes sense for the version I just installed, or I'm just installing and building. Okay, so it's a lot of preamble here. I think this introduction is really nice and friendly, but I'm interested in getting started. So let's try and get into some justification. Why Jujitsu? Okay, it's DVCS, like Git. Why should you care? It's simpler and easier than Git. At the same time, is more powerful, which I agree is a pretty huge claim. Normally, complexity is kind of the trade-off for when you get power. But yeah, and he mentions that here. The power has to be worth it, and people flock to Git for its power. Jujitsu manages to create a VCS that takes the best of Git, the best of Mercurial, and and I've heard it also takes the best of some other tools, like something called PyJoule, I think. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And Darks. And synthesize it into something new, yet strangely familiar. It's managed to have a smaller number of essential tools, but they're more powerful because they work together in a cleaner way. Advanced JJ usage can give you additional powerful tools in your VCS sandbox that are very difficult with Git. That sounds like a big claim, so he's going to try and show us. And it's got a Git compatible backend. That's a big selling point. Okay, how to read this tutorial. It's split up into different sections. in the Hello World section, we show off very core concepts I think we should focus on here to start. Everything's built on top of this. If you want to skip around, at least consider reading this part first, or just skim it. Great. Akris asks, the question is, how much does it mess with the existing repository? That's a very good question. I will say that I did use JJ for a little bit on my Mozilla Unified folder and then got freaked out by not understanding it and then just continued to use Git, and that it's been fine so far. So I believe you can use them kind of in parallel, and that Jujitsu has like a secondary store that it uses. But I'm hoping that if there is some kind of, I don't know, any kind of like corruption, if there's some kind of bridge where like you cross it and suddenly Jujitsu must be the way with which you interact with the repository, I'm hoping that this tutorial lays it out, because I'm not ready yet. I want to feel like I'm effective before I start using it as my primary interface for version control. Okay, so we're going to be reading about the Hello World, and then he's got all these different sections, but let's start with the Hello World. How to install it. Hey, I've already done that. Although he did it not with Brew, but he did it with Cargo, which is fine. I did it with Homebrew, so I should have 0.27.0 now. Let's keep going. Creating a repository. So I don't want to create a repository. I already have one. So I want to use JJ with a pre-existing Git repository. That's more realistic. So let's go back into the Jujitsu tutorial. Concepts, working copy, configuration, maybe setup. Cargo install, NixOS, this is just getting installed. Initial configuration, this sounds important. This is very important. Let's do that. We need to configure it with this stuff. So I'm not Martin von Zweiberg, I'm Mike Conley. And then the other one is my email. So that's not my email address. Oh, I haven't encountered anything like that. Just type JJ, says Simon. So if I just type in JJ, what happens? There's no JJ repository. It looks like this is a Git repo. Oh, you can create a JJ back Git repo. Oh, this is so helpful. See, Git would never be this helpful. Never. This is great. JJ Git init colocate. Incredible. Done importing changes from the underlying Git repo. The following remote bookmarks aren't associated with the existing local bookmarks, main at origin. Hint, run JJ bookmark track main origin to keep local bookmarks updated on future pulls. Okay, that sounds reasonable. Let's do that. Thank you, Simon, for that tip. So what do we have here? I type in JJ, and this is one thing I love right off the bat. First impression. I love that the primary output of just the running the tool is to give me a graph, because that's, if you recall, anytime I worked with Mercurial, and much of the time I'm working with Git, I'm constantly looking at the log. In fact, I mentioned that in my how M. Conley uses Mercurial, is I'm constantly using glog, or I was. The command I use most often is hgglog, which shows a graphical representation of the current state of the tree. I almost reflexively run this command before I do anything else. And that's great. That's a great first impression. It's also very rich. You know, like it's got color. Now, this is a concept I remember as well from my first time looking at this. It's not cheating, I think, to tell you that I remember this from my past foray into Jiu-Jitsu, is where Mercurial has these change IDs, change numbers, and they would always increment, but they were only ever locally preserved. Like, you can't assume that a person would have the same revision if they had a different checkout of a repository. If they had the same change ID, it would be it wouldn't necessarily be the same hash. The hash was consistent, but this part wasn't. This is like a local ID. I think this is the equivalent. It is not numeric, it is alphabetical, which is interesting. But what's nice is that Jujitsu is smart enough to realize that I can refer to this just with the letter X, because that's the only revision it knows about in recent memory that starts with X. And so it's telling me when it highlights, I don't know if maybe the font's not big enough, or maybe the color is a little bit difficult, but it's telling me that I can refer to this just as X, and this one is just as Z. Now there's also the SHA, the underlying SHA, and it's the same idea. That one's, the 2 is highlighted and the 7's highlighted here. So these are like the shortcut names, which is nice. The other thing to note is that this is my commit. This is the one that I had created, and now I'm already here. Like, it's telling me that I'm already like working on something on top of this pre-existing commit. And that is another thing I remember from my first foray into this, is that there's no staging area. Now that's true for Mercurial as well. Mercurial did not have a concept of staging. It's just, you had your working your working copy. If you made changes to it, those changes, if you typed commit, those would go into a commit. Now you could choose to exclude certain files from a commit and say like, okay, I want to commit everything except this directory or this file, but everything else would go into the commit. And there was no sort of like futzing around with like git add this and git add that. Does git work inside Jujitsu directory? It should. Like git log, yeah. It still works. It still knows, but it thinks its concept of where I am is I'm pointed at head, main. Jujitsu thinks I'm working on this, which is like an like, do these share? Oh, like, git log 7CA. That's right. They're sharing this, but what's this? 2E9. Does it have any idea what that is? Yes, there is a revision that has been created. It's like a headless revision. There's no bookmark on it. There's no, but like, I think Jujitsu is taking care of it. Git will often think I'm in a detached head state. Yes, right. Very interesting. Okay, so enough thinking about Mercurial. Let's go back to the tutorial, Steve's tutorial. So I've got my repository, and let's move on. So JJST, viewing the current status with JJST. You can view the current status with JJST. Let's run it. So this is a slightly different visualization, I guess, of our current status. Like, this is one visualization with like kind of like a graph, and then JJST for status presumably is telling me this is more textual, although this little line makes me think that maybe it's a more verbose, maybe a richer version of the graph. Hard to tell, but this is obviously where I'm at. That's the working copy. Let's see what Steve says about this. So if I had changes, local changes, and maybe I do, maybe I should add some touch, some new file.md. If I do JJST, I've got some working copy changes. So it knows I want to add this without having to git add it. So that's interesting. What if I modify the README? So far, so good. So it knows I've modified README. No fiddling around with staging so far. I mean, Git would do the same thing. Git knows that I've added this file and that I've modified this one, but in order to commit these, I would have to stage them. And I don't believe that's the case with Jujitsu. Okay. This is the JJ Pager, a program that shows the output of commands and lets you scroll through them if they're really long. You can hit Q to get back to your console. You can request to not use Pager by using JJStat no Pager, or if you hate the Pager and want to turn it off, you can configure that with paginate never. Now, this might be because Steve was using Windows. I'm familiar with Pager. I'm familiar with the paging stuff, but I'm obviously not hitting the Pager. I'm just hitting the end of the output, and then we are back in our terminal. So presumably if I had a lot of changes, I might enter Pager, and then that's similar with what you would expect from Git. Okay. So there's some ways of configuring it. I'm going to present the examples in the book as if this is the configuration, because managing text is easier than wrangling screenshots. The same information ends up on the screen no matter what way you prefer. Speaking of, let's actually talk about the output of JJ ST. I'm saying stat because I presume ST stands for status, right? Status. Show high-level repo status. Yeah. And it's a shortcut for status. Yeah, of course. So I'm going to call it status because that's easier than saying st or stat. Well, maybe I'll say stat. JJ stat. Status. Whatever. There's a surprising amount of stuff to talk about here. Let's dig into it. Cool. This is the first thing we need to talk about. Unlike Git, JJ has no index. Wait, don't close the tab and don't shut off the stream. JJST, lol. Here's the thing. JJ gives you the same ability to craft artisanal, beautiful commits that have exactly what we want them, but it doesn't need to index to do it. This is a running theme with JJ. It gives you fewer tools, but those tools end up having equivalent or even more power than their Git counterparts. Because there are fewer tools, there's also less to learn. Now, I'm one of those, the Git CLI is too complex and Git is too hard to learn people. I agree. But I do acknowledge that puts me in the minority. But let's reframe that. If we can make something more powerful and easier, sign me up. We'll get into how to reproduce the power of an index later. For now, what we need to know is that every time you run JJ command, it examines the working copy and takes a snapshot. That, I remember that from the last time I went through this, and that's very, very interesting. No matter what JJ command you run, one of the first things that JJ will do is kind of like update its internal notion of the state of the working directory, the working folder, and it takes a snapshot. So, like, one thing to note is that the version, the SHA changed when we added those files. Remember how it was like 2E9AB9? Now it's E5276A7C. So a transparent commit occurred in the background here, where presumably these files were added. Or in this case, it's just like, yeah, some new file and then this line was added. That happened transparently, and it happened probably because I added those files and then typed in a JJ command. So that also means, when I think about it, if you make a change to a file, or add a file, or remove a file, or make any change to the working copy, and you don't run a JJ command, JJ has no idea. Jujitsu has no idea that change has occurred, which is probably fine, but it is a thing that is an interesting thing. The JJ has no idea, unless maybe there's a way you can get like Watchman to alert it to update its snapshot, which maybe is a thing. Okay. Our brand new repo shows that we have two changes. You'll notice that the text on the second one says commit there, and yeah, okay, so JJ has this few different concepts. The first is a commit. Our two commits have the identifiers this and this. What? Hold on. JJ stat. JJ stat. It's you know what? It's because I hadn't created the 000. This special one is probably reserved for the empty initial commit, which we already committed something, so we don't see it there. There's also the idea of a change, and that's that in JJ, commits can evolve over time, but we still need a stable identifier to talk about those changes, so we have a change ID. I love that. That reminds me of Mercurial. And that's this and Z. Yeah, these things. One really cool thing is that they use a disjoint set of identifiers. This can never be a commit ID, but must be a change ID. And this can never be a change ID, but must be a commit ID. And that's surprisingly handy. That's interesting. I hadn't noticed that. But yeah, absolutely. These SHAs are going to be hex strings. It's a hex value. Right? Like that's always the case. Yeah. Hex. And we will talk more about commits and changes soon, how they're different. First part is that each repository always has this change and it's always empty. It's called the root commit as a foundation of the whole repository. Given that it's empty, JJ has created a second change based on top of it. In that case, it's this. Right, and is tracking the contents of the working copy. Since it's not empty, its line here doesn't have the empty bit like our root change does. Finally, both of our changes say no description set, and that's because we haven't given them a description. We'll talk about description in the next section. Using JJ to describe our commits in a human-friendly way. While we can refer to our changes by their change ID or commit ID, that's not as great. Agreed. Like, no description set, and that is all I get. That is not handy. I keep using stat, and I need to stop doing that. Yeah, JJ status. JJST. I gotta get that in my muscles. Text is a much better way of describing things. However, all right, we already did this part. We set the email and username. Whenever we feel like it, we can describe our changes with JJ describe. The simplest way to use it with the -M or message flag that allows us to pass the description on the command line. So we're going to say JJ describe -M, the first substantive change via JJ. Okay, so our change ID didn't change, but the hash did, because under the underlying Git repository, a commit was made, and like anytime you change a thing in a Git repository, that is going to go ahead and update the SHA. Try this, says Simon. So this is interesting. Simon wants me to try this. Let's let's see what this says. This is saying JJ log -R, and then what I'm seeing here is similar to the revset syntax from Mercurial, which, to be clear, I never took full advantage of. I know a lot of people found that very handy, but I never took advantage of it. So that's interesting. This allows me to see more. It's allowing me to go back further. I wonder if I could have done that with 3, 2. Okay, so that's telling me how deep to go. Okay, that's fine. And so yeah, now we can see our root commit. So that's interesting. Cool. Thanks, Simon. I wonder if there was an easier way, like JJ log help. Is there a way I can see back a certain limit, number of revisions to show? JJ log -N5. No, that's not it. So it'll only. That's the way you can go back further. Ancestors. I can't see more ancestors. Limit number of revisions to show. Applied after revisions are filtered and reordered topologically, but before being reversed. Don't show the graph, show flat. If no path or revisions are specified, this defaults to the rev sets log setting. Ignore space changes, ignore working copy, ignore immutable. Okay, well for now let's just keep reading the tutorial. So what we've done is we've updated the description of this commit. Yeah, and then the change ID changed. That's some book writing magic. I'm editing the book manually, and so it may make some adjustments that end up giving you different change IDs and commit IDs than I do. But yeah, this part changed. Our message, Hello World, has replaced the no description set. We're going to be able to see this whenever we look at our repository history. For more real changes, though, you'll probably want to not use the -M flag. And since descriptions can be set at any time, you can also change them too. Let's try it again. Okay, that opened up Vim. That's interesting. The first substantive change to JJ. Great. So I can do that. I can update the commit. Oh, Steve's using Notepad. That's very interesting. This window shows my original message, Hello World, a bunch of files, or a bunch of lines, start with JJ. And then, Steve makes a longer description. Cool. And after saving and closing, we get this output. The first line, but the rest are still in there. Eagle-eyed readers may notice one other change. Let's take these two outputs and put them next to each other. Yeah, the commit ID. They changed. Our commit is evolving, but we have a stable, static reference to this particular change, which is interesting. Okay. Let's see. Simon is suggesting this. Log -N 10 are all. But if I don't supply the rev set, it cuts it off after the first 2. Or maybe it's attempting to avoid the empty one. Like, let's add another one. Vim, some new file. Hey, here's a new line. JJ So I've got some more changes. It also seems to think that I've updated. Oh, I guess I updated README. Okay. JJ describe. Now, how do I commit this change? JJ help. Update the description. Create a new change on top. JJ commit. -M. More changes. Okay, so now I'm not getting freaked out by this. What it's basically saying is, okay, I've cleared all of my uncommitted changes, and now I'm prepared to do a new. My working copy, my working directory is empty. There are no uncommitted changes. More changes is the parent, and I am now at the state with which we can like create more changes. And now if I do JJ log n10. Okay, now it's showing 3. So I think it's really just truncating the root one. I'm not sure why you need. It seems to stop showing commits when they have been pushed to the remote. Oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting. And you know what? I kind of like it. JJ log v. Is there a verbose one? JJ graph? No. Okay, let's keep going. Using JJ new to create new changes. We're done with our first commit. We're ready to do more work. Let's start that by doing JJ new. So you say JJ new. Oh, now that's interesting because we already had an empty commit with no description set, and now we've created yet another one. Now here's a fun thing. One thing I know is that no matter what, you can undo the last thing you just did with JJ undo. I love that. That's like a really, really great feature. Like no matter what, if what you just did, you're not a fan, JJ undo will always reverse it, which is great. Because I'm constantly messing up. Okay, so now I'm in this state. We now have a new change that's empty and has no description, but its parent is our previous change. Let's check out JJST. Nice, a clean working directory. All of our changes were made in this, and we're starting this change fresh. We now technically have a very primitive but near complete workflow. That's really all you need to know to get started. To practice, let's make another change. This time I'm going to describe things first before I make any changes. So I can go JJ describe -M. Some new lines are being added. And it's currently empty, but I now have a description for it. And then I'm going to update some. Here's yet another new line. What do you know? Okay. And then let's see that JJ noticed it. Yes. And we have a new commit ID. Since we're done with this change, let's start a new one. JJ new. Great. So now I've got all these things. I've got all these things. Very nice. We're just seeing the parent change is very restricted, though. It'd be nice if we could look at all the work we've done. Let's tackle that next. Hey, I agree. Good job, Steve. You know what I'm thinking. Let's look at our chain of changes. I agree. This is sort of like GitLog, but it's very different. The very first character is @. Now, this is similar to Mercurial. I remember this. @ is a special name for whichever commit the working copy reflects. At first, I kind of thought about it like head and git, but that's not correct. Head is the most recent commit, but @ represents the working copy, which may be dirty from Git's point of view. This is our first glimpse into the power of indexless workflow. We have one less concept, but haven't actually lost any power. Yeah. The change ID. On the far right, we see the commit ID. So that's the change ID is here, and the commit ID is over here. This is because when viewing things this way, we almost certainly don't care about the commit ID. We care about the sequence of stable change identifiers. Between the two is the author and the time. And on the line below, we have our description. At the bottom, we have our root commit, but instead of an author and a time, it says root. Now, that's interesting because I didn't see that with JJ log. But that's, I presume it's because what you said, Simon, is because we have pushed that to remote. At the bottom, we have a root commitment instead of an author in time. It says root. This is a rev set, which is a feature we'll explore later, but the short of this is JJ has a really powerful way to select lists of revisions. Root is a function in this language. Yes, it has functions that returns the root commit. My text representation of the output of JJ log was missing something. Here's a screenshot of my terminal. You may notice something interesting. What's it missing? I don't know. The output has color in a lot of it, but the most important bit is the high. Oh, he's saying that the textual description is missing the color. Okay, fair enough. The highlights in the revision IDs and commit IDs. So I had mentioned this before. Yeah, you see how the YW is in magenta, but the rest of the ID is in gray. Similar to Git, when talking about an ID, you only need to refer to the unique prefix, not the whole ID. So that magenta bit is showing you set prefix. We could run commands that refer to such and such or YW, and they'd both work. Why is it 2 characters? Because we also have this other one, and they both start with Y. But see how the middle change P is the prefix and your such and such is in gray because the only change that starts with P. Yeah. So you only need P to refer to this one. You need YY to refer to this one and YW to refer to this one and only Z for this one. It's very cool that the UI is communicating this to us. And that's why the format of change IDs is very cool. By using letters, there's less likely to be conflicts because there are more possibilities. There are 26 possibilities rather than 16. That's interesting. For each character, not for each character, not for the entire change. Yeah. There are many more secrets to JJLog, but for now, this is enough to be able to go back and look at all the changes. Let's recap. Okay, and then he does a recap. I'm not going to recap. Let's keep moving. Real world workflows. Hey, we just graduated from part 2. Pew, pew, pew. All right. Stretch. If you've got a snack, feel free to mow down on your snack. Should be also bold or underline. What should be bold or underline? These things? Maybe. Certainly, I don't know if that's helpful if you have a hard time seeing this color on top of, like, beside this color. If, like, I don't know what the color accessibility story is here. But I agree. You know, it'd probably be more accessible if there was more hinting. Okay, let's keep moving. We can use JJ, but I wouldn't say our workflow is great. In this chapter, we're going to explore 2 different workflows that are popular with JJ users. Like Git, JJ is extremely flexible, so you can customize your workflow in many ways. I'd like to show you 2 examples. For me, understanding the basics wasn't tough, but when I actually sat down to use JJ, I found myself tripping up. With a few more commands, we have nice workflows that let us start to work a bit more naturally. The squash workflow, and then the edit workflow. I am probably an edit. Well, no, I think I'm an edit workflow person. But let's read on. The squash workflow is preferred by JJ's creator, Martin. It's called the squash workflow because it uses a command we haven't interacted with yet, JJ squash. The second reason that I'm talking about this workflow first is that it is the workflow that should appeal to people who are big fans of Git's index, and I think comparing and contrasting the two is interesting. So you describe the work you want to do. You create an empty change on top of that one. We produce work we want to put into our change, and then we JJ squash move changes from at into the change where we describe what to do. In some senses, this workflow is like using the Git index where we have our list of current changes, and then we pull the ones we want into our commit, like Git add, so like the staging area. Start work by describing it. So this is not the way I like to work. I don't like this, the squash thing, but let's read on. Describe the work that we want to do. That's fine. But I love the fact that you can start with the description. You can start with your commit message, which is nice. You don't have to, but you can start that way. And then they create a new empty change on top of that one. We now have 2 empty changes. There's no issue having 2 empty commits, one after the other. And since we're using it like the index, we don't really need to give it a name either. It's just a scratch space. So let's make a change. All right, we might as well practice this. Excuse me. So what did he do? JJ new. Okay, so we've got two, or hang on, JJ undo, JJ describe. What's print goodbye as well as hello. I'm gonna say practice the squash workflow, and then JJ new. Okay, let's make a change to our code. I'm gonna just change our readmes. Let's also try squashing. JJST. So I modified that file. Empty and no description set. We're in the same situation here. We now have an even wilder situation than before. Our current change has stuff in it, but the parent is empty. So we're going to change, take our change from a staging area, quote, and put it into our commit. We do that with JJ squash. Okay, so this one's no longer empty. So we basically took what was in the working copy and that had changed, and we'd throw it in there. And I wonder if we could have chosen which file. Yeah, you can choose which. Okay, that's very interesting. You can choose the files and directories. All right, let's actually read what Steve wrote before I make an assumption of what happened. At is now empty with no description, and the parent is now no longer empty. Our changes are now in this revision, or this change. What we did is kind of the equivalent of git commit a amend, but what about more focused changes? Well, if we only want to add a specific file, we can pass it as an argument because we only had one file. The previous command was equivalent to this. So let's try that. Let's make two changes. Let's also try squashing. Here's a modification, some new file. Here's another modification. That's fine, it's a spelling error. And then I'm gonna go JJ squash. I'm just gonna do the readme. Right, and then the other one, so this one updated its commit with the change in the one file, but not in the other. Okay, that's very interesting. Make a few changes and then do this. JJ squash dash I. So that's the other, oh, that's interesting. So there's an interactive viewer. Hooah! All right, JJ squash I. So there's some kind of curses viewer here, and I can pick and choose the things that I want to include. So let's just include this line, but not the new line afterwards. All right, and then how do I save? Let's press space again to undo, then hit F to toggle folding. I can use the mouse? Get out of here! It's mouse capable. That's cool. All right, and then what do I do? How do I save it? Hit C to confirm. I'm not selecting any since these are just nonsense stuff. You can get rid of stuff in stuff at with JJ abandon. Okay. That's interesting that the diff format is different. I guess this is referring to these lines are the same, they match. The line numbers are different, but the contents match, and it's saying that these are different. These were added. And this line was added. Okay. Now if I say JJ abandon, what does that do? Nothing. It gets rid of any uncommitted changes, is what that means. Now what if I do JJ undo? They're back. Incredible. I like that. I like that. I love that I can JJ undo an abandon. Same power, less concepts. We've got the tools the index gives us. So yeah, this is very similar, I think, to the staging area if you want to do things that way. Let's look at the other workflow, the edit workflow. So let's JJ abandon for real. Well, I like the previous workflow. Some people just don't. They use a workflow that adds a different command, JJ edit, along with a second new command, JJ next, as well as a new flag to JJ new. Lots to learn. So the workflow goes like this. Excuse me. We create a new change to work on our feature. If we end up doing exactly what we wanted to do, we're done. If we realize we want to break this up into smaller changes, we do it by making a new change before the current one, swapping to it and making that change. Wait. If we realize we want to break it up into smaller changes, we do it by making a new change before the current one, swapping to it, and then making that change, and then we go back to the main change. This step 3 sounds a little strange. Let's in my mind it's like, well, you're going to conflict. But maybe jujitsu is smart. Let's see. Create a new change to work on our feature. Let's create a feature that is undoing our previous feature. We're going to revert to hello world only. Now, our previous workflow left at an empty change, or an empty change. If you use this workflow, at will often be on an existing change. So the real use of this workflow would start by JJ new. So we get a new. We're going to go remove some extraneous text. Ooh, JJ undo. We've got our empty. I think, yeah, we want to look more like this. So what I'm going to do is JJ describe the existing empty commit. Remove some extraneous text. Good. But since we have an empty change, that's right. So Steve and I are on the same wavelength here. So let's change our file. Okay, so then I go ahead and I'm going to get rid of some lines. Done. And some new file. We're going to get rid of that one. In the best case, we're happy with this change and we're done. When we begin more work, we start with JJ new M and get to work. Great. But sometimes when we're working on something, we realize we also want a different change. Maybe it relies on this one. For example, let's say that we were working on undoing this goodbye feature, but we realized we wanted to refactor printing out into its own function because that's a terrible idea in practice, and so it makes for a good example to play around. Okay. What we want to do is make a new change before this one. So let's try this. Make a new change and edit it. Whoa, what's going on here? We have a new flag to JJ new. This says to create the new change before the current one. That's exactly what we asked. The first line of the output should raise some eyebrows. Rebased 1 descendant commits. Wait, hold on. So we had only print hello world. Those are the working copy changes. And then we're going to do this. JJ new dash B at dash M add do some other stuff. Rebased 1 descendant commits. Presumably this is the thing that was rebased, I guess. Because we've created a change before the one we're on, it automatically rebased our original change. How can it do that? What if there are conflicts? Relax, we'll get there. All I'll say is something that's probably hard to believe. This operation will always succeed and we will have our working copy at the commit we just inserted. I mean, in a way that kind of makes sense because the working commit now is just an empty one, so it should rebase just fine. In the meantime, let's examine our log. Yeah, we're right here. We can see that at is at our new empty change. We have the original change is after us. So this one, removing some extraneous text. Some of you may recognize that one, even though we rebased it on top of our current change. The change ID is the same. Yeah, the commit ID changed from this to this, though. The change ID is stable, but we can keep track of how the change changes over time. Neat. Anyway, and now we can edit the this commit that we're on. So let's change main. When we first open the file, you see this. Remember, this change is before the one where we remove the goodbye messages, so that is returned. Here's what we end up with. Okay, so I'm gonna edit readme. This is a line that's removed later on. I'm gonna put in, here's a new line. Here's a modification. I'm also Yeah, here's a new line under the one we're about to remove. Okay. We have finished. Let's see our current status. JJ status. Rebased one descendant on updated working copy. Yet again, a rebase, because we've changed the contents of our change. All of the changes that depend on it must be rebased. This happens all the time without fail, so it's not something you'll get stuck on at this stage. So that's interesting. It happens all the time without fail. Okay, well, what if I change the line that I removed? I change that period to a question mark. Still likes it. Still likes it. Fascinating. Return to our main change. Now that we're done, we're going to go back to editing our original commit. To do that, we should use JJEdit, which is where this workflow gets its name from. JJEdit sets the working copy to the contents of a change, and now changes you make will update that change. I think I know what that means. That was the wrong line. Was it a different line that I removed? You're removing the one above. Change that one. This one? Remove this one? Here's a modification. Still likes it. Let's put an exclamation mark in front of every single line. Still likes it. Fascinating. So we're going to go back to editing our original commit. To do that, we could use JJEdit, which is where the workflow gets its name from. JJEdit sets the working copy of the contents of a change, and changes you make will update that change. Doing that would look like this. JJEdit O, presumably because O is the identifier for this. That's the O that it's referring to. So for us, we want W. Now, why is there an X there? Now it has detected a conflict. It has detected a conflict. We may have kind of gone off the beaten path here. We created a conflict for ourselves. So we may have to deal with that in a second. But okay, JJEdit W. Warning, there are unresolved conflicts at these paths on readme.md, a two-sided conflict. I could have also used next -- edit, which will move to the child. So now I'm there, yeah. And at is our original change. Okay, so conflicts. Thankfully, we are in the part where we learn about conflicts and merging. Okay. Okay, so maybe we have to skip to dealing with conflicts. Well, let's see if we can figure it out ourselves. Actually, all right. Let's quickly read this. When you're merging or rebasing, if you change their compatibility, you may introduce conflict. We help it. Let's deliberately introduce conflict. We have done that. This is Steve setting up a conflict. Now he's actually set a branch off of a parent revision, but everything looks to be in order. We'll rebase. New conflicts emerged. So, and then it reports that there's a conflict here. Great. Rebases always succeed. If there's a conflict, it doesn't make you stop and fix it. It records that there's a conflict and still performs the rest of the rebase. This is very powerful. Even in this case with one change, it lets us handle the conflict when we're ready. We can keep making changes to our current change if we want to. And then we check our log again. There's still a conflict. Excuse me. It automatically rebases this one on top of this one. Again, it's still in conflict, but that's totally okay. We only need to handle it when we're ready. The automatic rebasing behavior only works because JJ is okay with commits being in conflict. And if we had even more child commits, they'd all be rebased automatically. The output we got back when the conflict was created gave us some advice. To resolve the conflict, start by updating to it. Then did it give us some advice? I don't see any advice. The advice is good, but also more complex than we need right now. Doing this is a great way to handle the complex resolution, but you want to double check what you've done before you apply the changes. We are just using a small example to make a point. Therefore, we can just edit the file and remove the conflict markers. So it's conflict markers. So if I edit the file, JJ edit, I'm already there, I think. I'm already editing that one. And I update README. There are conflict markers in here. Conflict side 1 changes from base to side 2. Okay, so let's merge this stuff. So the merge is we're going to keep all of the exclamation marks, but we're going to get rid of, let's also try squashing that line. And I'm also going to add some new text. And we'll get rid of this. And then I'll add a new line at the end. I'll save that. So now it doesn't look like, am I still conflicted? No. Git uses a combination to mark conflicts. JJ has more rich conflict markers. It still uses these to indicate the start and end, but it has two other markers. The pluses indicate the start of a snapshot, and percents mark the start of a diff. So we can see that we have two print lines. So the pluses indicate the start of a snapshot, and the percents mark the start of a diff. Our changes want to remove one of them. But since that's not the same thing, conflict. To resolve this, we apply our own take on the diff to the snapshot. So, right, okay. Conflict resolved. Incredible. So now I can just go like JJ commit? No, I want to, how do I finish editing? I've finished editing. Return to our main change. Double check JJ log. How do I say that I'm done editing? JJ, it's the working copy. Now changes you make will update the change. How do I say that I'm done? You don't? JJ new if you want a new commit. Right. Okay. Great. Great. Okay. If I want a new commit. If I didn't, I'd have these like working copy changes, but I have to forget the notion that they're like dangling. They are in the repository. It's just it's telling me what is different between my working copy and the parent. That's what it's doing. So interesting. Workflow is a good alternative for the edit workflow. Okay, so let's go back to branching, merging, and conflicts. We now know how to deal with conflicts. That is great. I'm very happy about that. That's very nice. The fact that it doesn't interrupt me to whenever conflicts occur during a rebase. Chef's kiss. When I first heard of anonymous branches, I got very confused. Git models branches as a pointer to a commit, and that pointer needs a name, so that's a branch. Turns out you don't really need to name your branches, and doing so is also not really worth it. I've heard that inside of Meta, where they use a similar VCS tool that also has anonymous branches, almost nobody bothers to name their branches once they get used to things. Let's talk about it. What is a branch? When two changes share the same parent change, we say that they are branching because the graph of commits would look like this. So F and G are really two changes that are on a branch because it looks like they're branching off from D and E. In reality, in Git, both would be on a branch because everything is on some sort of branch in Git. If you're not on a branch, Git will say something like this. Detached head. Git considers any commit that's not part of a branch to be garbage, and so will garbage collect those commits at some point. Git is very branch-centric. Jujitsu does not think about the world this way. Consider the diagram above. We didn't name any of these branches, yet the diagram still makes sense. There's not really an inherent need to name our branches, just like there isn't an inherent need to describe our changes. That said, it would be nice to know how to refer to different branches, even if they're not named. I think that's all very reasonable. Okay, let's see how this works. Creating two branches from the same commit. So there I am. I'm on an empty change. If not, use JJ New to create one. We'll start with a blank slate. Common reason for branching is to work on two different ideas at once. So let's start two different features. One to add some more documentation to our project, and another to split our print function into hello and goodbye functions. We'll work on the documentation. Let's describe our current commit, work on that. JJ describe adding a new file to our set. Next, we want to make a change so that to our work on our hello and goodbye functions. We want this change to build on top of such and such. So we'll say that. Wait. Copy. Next, we want to make a change to work on our hello and goodbye functions. We want this change to build on top of the parent, not the working copy. So we'll just say that. New. We want to create our new change with the parent O, which we could see as a short name for this one. Your change ID may be different if you're not following me, so you may want to double check you've got the right change. Okay. JJ new W. Let's describe this one too. JJ describe M. Altering some existing files. Excellent. We've got two different changes, both with the parent W. WYVNLUSS. So we created a branch. We didn't need to name it. So, and that's how things work with Mercurial too. That is very familiar. So let's edit the description to update this description. So let's go ahead and alter an existing file. Editing this file on a branch, yo. An anonymous branch. Okay. And then JJ log. We're here. Those are in the working copy changes. Now, if I switch over to the there's a fork in the road. So if those branches don't have names, how do we tell them apart? Well, the descriptions of their commits are right there. We look at them and easily tell which of the two we care about, and then use their change IDs to distinguish between them. Coming up with an extra name is inherently helpful here. Of course, sometimes it can be. That's why eventually we'll talk about named branches. But the important thing to realize here is you only have to name branches when adding a name. Add some sort of value. That's nice. Getting a list of branches. What if we have a ton of branches? We can actually ask JJ-log to show us the head of every anonymous branch. We can do that with JJ-log-our heads all. Woo! These are all of the heads. This shows us both of our heads, but what is it, that head stuff? It's called a rev set. It's what we're going to talk about next. Okay, this is familiar. I find Simon says, I find JJ-log much more understandable than JJST. Yeah, I think JJST is really just supposed to, like, the important part is it describing what is in your working copy. I think this stuff is like secondary or like more, yeah, it's not the main event. And then JJ-log, I agree. Like, this is the equivalent of HG-glog. Yeah, okay. Figuring out where our changes are with rev sets. We have, so where are we in our tutorial? We're like, because like Steve hasn't completed his tutorial yet. I see like there are sections here for in 6.1 and 8.2. We're at 4.2. If we can get to the end of, if we can get to the end of 5.3, I'll be pretty happy. All right, let's read on. We have learned about two kinds of identifiers in JJ: change IDs and commit IDs. But what if we want to talk about, for example, a range of commits, which is great. Yeah, I sometimes work with ranges of commits. And JJ has a concept called a rev set, short for a revision set. Sometimes people say revision instead of commit. Rev set is just nicer to say than com set, so it's stuck. Yep, naming, it's hard. It sounds pretty intense at first, but I promise it's simpler than you think. JJ supports a functional language to describe rev sets. Almost every command in JJ takes a revision flag, which is a revision to operate on that. Defaults to at. It means when we do JJ new, we're basically doing JJ new -r at. That is, create a new change with a parent revision of the current working copy. At is actually our first example of the rev set language. This is called a symbol. Symbols are a means of specifying a single commit. At refers to the change containing the current working copy, but a change ID or commit ID are other examples of symbols. Cool. Operators let you describe more complex relationships between changes. Like, I think Git has a similar kind of language. Like, anytime you use like head tilde one, branch, like the hat symbol, like Git has a similar kind of language. I think this is a much richer language, is my understanding. And I know Mercurial's was much richer. It was like a subset of Python, sort of. Operators let you describe more complex relationships between changes. Don't quote me on that Python thing. For example, remember how in the squash workflow we would move the contents of the working directory into the parent change? Well, the dash operator refers to the parent of a given revision, and at is the change referring to the current working directory. So we might say we squash the contents of at into at minus. And in fact, JJ squash is short for JJ squash -r at. There are many operators, including but not limited to x and % y, changes that are in both x and y, x or y, changes that are in either x or y, ancestors of x, descendants of x. This is also very similar to Mercurial. And more. The final bit is the most interesting, and that's functions. Functions allow for more complex selection of a series of changes. The simplest functions are root, all, mine. More complex functions, so that's interesting, authored by the current user. More complex functions can take arguments, parents, ancestors, depth, heads, and descriptions. Oh, so if I say like JJ log -r description, let's see, sum, the word sum. Yeah. Can I make that sum or description sum? Hey, all right, cool. Maybe there's a way of making this case insensitive. I don't know. Resets are very powerful and very convenient. Would you like to find every commit by me containing the word print in the description? Try this. Yeah. Another really useful rev set is trunk. It'd be more useful when we get into sharing our changes. Trunk looks for a remote named origin or upstream, and it looks for a main master or trunk branch and then provides that. Since we don't have any of those things, so let's JJ log -r trunk. There it is. That's what's been pushed to GitHub. Very good. On the JJ Discord, several folks settled on this is a decent rev set for larger repositories. What does this mean? This will show the history from the working directory, some detail about remote branches, as well as the trunk. What's good varies between what you're trying to do and what your repository looks like, so experiment with some of this stuff to find something that works well for you. Custom aliases, yeah. First commit, added to README. I think that I'm going to believe that diamond means that that's been pushed remotely. That's what that diamond means. And probably that means like immutable, which I love. Diamond for meaning immutable. What a great choice. Okay, merging anonymous branches. Let's recall where we are. We have what we consider to be the head of our repository and then 2 branches. Let's create another change with that as the parent to simulate the idea that some changes have landed on our main branch while we were doing the work. Okay, so let's JJ new W. Someone added a cool new line to a file. JJ log. Okay. Pass the limit flags so we don't see every commit. Our history is getting a little long. Sure, if we'd like. Merging. Now, you may expect that you'd use a command like JJ merge to merge branches together. However, as of 0.14.0, JJ merge is deprecated and will be removed. So how the heck do we create merges? Well, what is a merge anyway? It's a new change that has more than one parent. How do you make new changes? With JJ new, so let's ask it to make a change that has both of these as parents. JJ new, that revision, and then an M. Okay, so JJ merge better. So JJ new this revision. I guess I could use OQ and then altering some existing files. And then merge 2 branches. Okay, merged 2 branches. There's something really wild. We can just do this as much as we want. No need to stop at 2 parents. Let's try this out. We're going to run a command I haven't told you about yet. JJ undo. Oh, yeah. JJ undo. Oh, yeah. I love that. We can undo our last command with a simple JJ undo. That's like our merge never can happen. Let's try merging both in at the same time. Let's merge 2 branches. So we're going to not merge, JJ new, OQ, L, and OX, merge 2 branches. So before I wasn't actually merging 2, I was merging like back into main. Now I'm going to merge 2 branches into main. Okay. And just like that, we're merged. Once again, remind the theme I discussed at the start. Simpler can also be more powerful. JJ has eliminated the need for entire commandment and lost any functionality. But what if we don't want to create a merge commit? JJ has rebase as well. Yes, good. So let's JJ undo. Haha. Like Git, JJ has a command called rebase. It does what it says. It takes a change, and instead of its current base, aka parent, it moves to a different parent, basing it again or rebasing it. So let's undo our merge. Let's keep a linear history by doing a rebase instead of a merge. Now this is what we tend to do. This is what I tend to do, and I think what most devs working on Firefox do locally is we keep a linear change history. Like that's what we expect to land. It's not a bunch of merge stuff. You can use JJ rebase in a few different ways. Let's show off the simplest rebasing a single change. Let's rebase, create hello and goodbye functions on top of our current change. So let's rebase L on top of OQ. So JJ rebase R and then D. This rebases a single revision to a certain destination, hence D. Great. JJ rebase -R L -D OQ. I love it. I love it. That's so nice. Since our branch only had 1 revision, this would be the same thing as passing -B, which would move the whole branch that revision is on, or -S, which rebases that revision as well as all of its descendants. I didn't get any output though. Let's look at our log. We've rebased successfully. @ is still here. That actually belies a very deep difference between JJ and Git that I learned from Austin Seep. JJ commands primarily operate on the data structure stored in its repository rather than on the working copy. One of the simplest consequences of this is JJ speed. Because the working copy is itself a commit and commits are in the database, I'm going to have to drop in just a second. We've hit our limit, so we didn't quite reach where I'd hoped, but we're still, I feel better about Jiu-Jitsu already. I really appreciate you watching me learn this stuff because like this has forced me to really kind of focus in on Jiu-Jitsu. Like I'm willing to just try this stuff now. So that's really exciting. Let's just finish this paragraph and then I'm going to end the stream. Okay, because the working copy is itself a commit and commits are in the database, it can treat it like any other commit. In this case, the difference is even larger. Git rebase works on the working copy. That is why it has to stop you and make you resolve things in the case where a commit happens, because it's about to create a new commit from the working copy. And if that's in conflict, it has to be fixed or the next commit is nonsense. We'll talk about how JJ handles conflicts shortly, but as I said before, rebases always succeed. So this change is quick. It's only modifying information in the repository, not touching any of the files we have in our working directory. This also means our working directory hasn't changed, so @ is in the same place it was before the rebase. All right, let's do one last thing. I'm going to rebase this empty change on top of this one. So JJ rebase OX onto, I'll use B, OX, D, because like normally I'd have like a whole series of commits and so -B is something I remember from Mercurial. It's going to take the whole branch or rebase it onto L. Not git log, JJ log. Incredible. And now how do I change where I'm at? I think I want to go JJ edit OX, or how do I update to it? Yeah, I probably JJ Edit OX. Yeah, that's what I want. Incredible. I'm really happy with this. Now, can I squash these? Can I like JJ Rebase? Is there an interactive Rebase? How do I like squash a bunch of, I guess JJ squash. Huh. How would I squash these down? I think I know. I think I have all the information I need to do that, but I need to look into it. But I feel really good. Hey, thanks for watching episode 397 of The Joy of Coding. Next week we're gonna get back to working in that Rust shared application services component thing that we were working on last week. But maybe we'll use Jujitsu instead of Git to create our work. That might be fun. We'll see. Hey, let me know what you thought of this episode. There's a link here at the bottom to a forum to help to rate this episode. Link to rate this episode. Let me just drop that in the chat in case that's where you are. I read everything that comes in. This is a great way for you to reach out to me if you have questions or you want to let me know what you'd like to see in the stream, what you want to see more of, what you want to see less of, etc., etc. That's how you can get in touch with me. And I really appreciate you watching me learn this stuff, and hopefully that was helpful to you. All right, well, I hope everyone has a great week, and I will see you next week with episode 398. Only 3 episodes. 2, really. Actually, yeah. Next week's episode will be 398, then it's 399, and then it's 400. That'll be very exciting. I might wear a funny hat. Have yourselves a great week, everybody. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
The joy of coding.
See ya.